Hello and welcome to this year's last episode of World Today, Diplomacy in 2025. From toppling governments to electing new ones, from wars to failing diplomacies, the year 2024 witnessed the good, the bad and the ugly. And in this last episode, we'll tell you how the world leaders and the diplomacy could reshape the world politics of 2025, the coming year. A new year, a new term, and a familiar face returning to the Oval Office. Never in recent memory has the fate of the world hinged on one person as heavily as it does today. It almost feels like major political and economic decisions in the world are on hold until Donald Trump takes office as the US president on the 20th of January 2025. Trump is coming back to make America great again. But as the 47th President of the United States of America, Trump has high expectations from American voters and a lot to deliver to the world order. With skyrocketing inflation, an uncontrolled immigration problem, and two full-fledged conflicts that can trigger World War III, the challenges he faces could make his first term look like a dress rehearsal. So how is Trump hoping to navigate through these choppy waters? Let's watch this report by my colleague Rudrashish Kanjalal.
This is one of the most controversial promises Trump has made, pardoning the January 6 Capitol rioters. Remember, this was one of the darkest days in modern American history. Thousands stormed the Capitol, disrupting the certification of the 2020 election results, leaving a trail of destruction and division in their wake. Over 1,000 people have faced charges ranging from trespassing to seditious conspiracy. But Trump has repeatedly called many of these individuals patriots and promised to pardon them on his very first day in office.
The moment we win, we will rapidly review the cases of every political prisoner unjustly victimized by the Harris regime, and I will sign their pardons on day one. I will sign it on day one.
But a presidential pardon won't erase the events of January 6. It will reopen a can of worms. Critics argue it could weaken America's moral authority on the global stage. Trump's promise to pardon the rioters might energize his supporters, but it could also draw fresh lines in America's political and cultural battlefields. Now coming to the economy, Trump's rallying cry during the campaign was all about fighting inflation. Remember his promise?
We will very simply make America affordable again. We're going to make it affordable. I will massively cut taxes for workers and small businesses, and we will have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our seniors.
Trump made it clear that his primary focus would be to tackle inflation and bring down the rising prices that have been squeezing the average American family. Grocery prices, gas prices, and general inflation. These were the topics Trump discussed most frequently with voters. But while these promises may have won him support, the reality is much more complicated. Economists have expressed concern about some of Trump's economic plans. For example, Trump has promised to lower costs by imposing tariffs, basically taxes, on imported goods, specifically targeting countries like China, Canada, and Mexico. While these might sound like a quick fix, it could actually backfire in a big way. You may ask why. Well, when you impose tariffs, the businesses that import goods from other countries are forced to pay extra cost. These businesses then pass through extra cost onto consumers, which could lead to even higher prices for everyday products. Imagine paying more for your favorite smartphone or even the groceries you buy each week. The problem with tariffs is that they can cause inflation, rather than reduce it. Take oil as an example. If the US places a tariff on oil imports, that would raise the cost of fuel for Americans. It's a similar story with other imported goods. Economists argue that while these tariffs may hurt foreign countries, they could hurt American consumers in the long run as well. Next up is immigration. Trump's hardline stance on immigration is well known. He has made it clear that he wants to ramp up efforts to deport undocumented workers, end birthright citizenship, and overhaul the immigration system.
I will shift massive portions of federal law enforcement to immigration enforcement. We're going to put a lot of immigration enforcement. We're going to close down the border day one. And we are going to, just so you understand, I am not a radical at all. I'm just a common sense person that was successful in what I did because of the same thing. We are going to let people, and we want people to come into our country. A lot of people. We need them. We need them for jobs. We need them for everything. We want people to come in, but they have to come in through a process. They have to come in legally.
But here's the catch. The American economy is heavily reliant on immigrant workers in many industries, especially agriculture, construction, and service sectors. Immigrants make up a significant portion of the labor force in these sectors, and removing them could create massive labor shortages. Trump has even went on to say that he will use US military for mass deportation. But if Trump goes ahead with mass deportations, industries that depend on immigrant labor might face huge challenges in finding replacements. For instance, workers who tend to crops, build homes, or provide essential services. If these are suddenly removed from the workforce, businesses will struggle to find these positions, and that could drive up wages. The immediate impact of that? Higher prices for the goods and services that rely on immigrant labor. Now let's shift gears and talk about trade. If you remember, Trump initiated a trade war with China, imposing tariffs and trade barriers. He has indicated that he would be ready to continue these tactics in his second term, which could disrupt global supply chains and put more pressure on American consumers.
I have stopped wars with tariffs by saying, you guys want to fight, it's great, but both of you are going to pay tariffs to the United States at 100%. And they have many purposes, tariffs, if properly used. I don't say you use them like a madman. I say properly used. But it didn't cost this country anything. It made this country money, and we never really got the chance to go all out.
This time around, Trump has already threatened to impose high tariffs on Canada, India, and China, just to name a few nations. Now, if Trump raises tariffs on goods like electronics, textiles, and furniture, it will increase the price of these products in the US. Retailers will either have to absorb those extra costs or pass them along to consumers. In many cases, it's the latter, which means higher prices for the everyday items you use. Now let's take a pivot to Trump's global agenda. His second term raises questions about his approach to NATO and the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump has been one of NATO's most outspoken critics, often accusing member nations of freeloading on America's defense budget. Trump has consistently pushed for NATO countries to meet their defense spending commitments with the defense bloc. It's almost certain he will double down on his stance.
Spending, we're paying for NATO, and we don't get so much out of it. And you know, I hate to tell you this about NATO. If we ever needed their help, let's say we were attacked, I don't believe they'd be there. I don't believe. I know the people. I know them. I can tell you country by country who would be there and who, but I don't believe they'd be there. But I took care of NATO. I said, you got to pay your bills. If you don't pay your bills, we're not going to be there to support you. And the following day, the money came rolling into NATO.
However, it's also possible that Trump could reduce America's military contributions or even withdraw from NATO altogether, as he has hinted in the past. Such a move would send shockwaves across Europe, especially as the continent grapples with Russia's aggression. Then there is Ukraine. Trump has been critical of the Biden administration's blank check approach to aid, and he has suggested the need for negotiations with Russia. Moreover, he says that he could end the war in just a day. The question is, what kind of deal would he propose? Would it involve territorial concessions to Russia? And more importantly, would Zelensky and NATO allies accept it? Such a scenario could fracture the international coalition supporting Ukraine and leave long-lasting scars on global alliances. At the end of the day, Trump's stance on Ukraine isn't just a policy choice. It's a question of America's role in the world. Whether it's a NATO contribution or aid to Ukraine, a Trump presidency in 2025 promises to be anything but predictable. Now, while Trump's agenda promises significant shifts in US policy, the global spotlight remains firmly fixed on two escalating crises: the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas conflict. Two wars, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, and the world teetering on the edge of chaos. As the calendar turns to 2025, one question looms larger than ever. Could this be the year we finally see peace? On one side, the Russia-Ukraine war dragging into its third year with no clear winner. On the other, the Israel-Hamas conflict, a power key threatening to engulf West Asia. As we enter the new year, could these wars finally see solutions? Or are we bracing for even greater turmoil? The Russia-Ukraine war, once expected to be a swift campaign by Moscow, has turned into a brutal, grinding conflict. Ukraine's fierce resistance, coupled with Western support, has left the Kremlin frustrated. But now, as both sides dig in, the world wonders, will 2025 bring a breakthrough or more bloodshed? Let's talk possibilities. Ukraine, buoyed by advanced Western weapons, is pushing for decisive victories to reclaim occupied territories. But Russia shows no sign of backing down, deploying new tactics and seeking alliances with countries like North Korea.
How are you? Thank you.
Despite multiple attempts at peace talks in 2024, including mediated efforts from NATO and the European Union, a resolution remains elusive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to rally international support, calling for increased military aid and economic sanctions against Russia. On the other hand, Russian President Vladimir Putin has doubled down on his territorial ambitions, claiming strategic victories in occupied regions. Both sides are locked in a battle of attrition, but key geopolitical players may influence the outcome this year. Donald Trump has hinted at reducing American involvement in Ukraine, suggesting that Europe should take greater responsibility for its defense. Trump's proposed strategy of forcing both Putin and Zelensky into direct negotiations has sparked mixed reactions globally. Critics argued this approach could embolden Russia, while supporters say it's a time for a diplomatic breakthrough. But here's the wild card: China. Having maintained a precarious neutrality, Beijing could emerge as a key mediator. However, this would come at the cost of possible undermining Western alliances. Meanwhile, the human cost of this war is staggering. Over 8 million Ukrainians have fled their homes, creating one of the largest refugee crises in recent history. Now, shifting our focus to West Asia, the Israel-Hamas war, one of the most devastating conflicts in recent history, has left a trail of destruction that is impossible to ignore. With over 45,000 Palestinians reportedly killed and entire neighborhoods in Gaza reduced to rubble, the humanitarian crisis in the region is at a breaking point. On the Israeli side, continued rocket attacks and incursions have pushed the country into a state of perpetual defense. The situation remains deeply polarized. Meanwhile, Hamas has leveraged its remaining influence to rally global sympathy for the Palestinian cause, making any peace process even more complicated. Even though recent reports suggest that ceasefire talks are 90% complete, the situation on ground remains volatile. Hamas still holds sway in Gaza and has made it clear that their goal is to resist Israeli control. With a new US administration taking office in 2025, could there be a shift in global diplomacy? The answer depends largely on how much political will can be mustered on both the sides to come to the table. However, many experts warn that until a drastic shift happens, either militarily or diplomatically, there is little hope for de-escalation. But is peace even a possibility in 2025? Analysts suggest that while complete resolutions are unlikely, de-escalation could happen under the right circumstances. For Ukraine, a potential ceasefire could come through increased international pressure on Russia or a stalemate that makes continued conflict unsustainable. As we look ahead, one thing is clear: the world cannot afford to turn a blind eye to these conflicts. Whether 2025 becomes the year of breakthrough or further breakdowns depends on the decisions made in capitals around the globe.
Now, as India moves into 2025, it's faced by both opportunities and challenges. America, one of India's most important strategic partners, will see the return of Donald Trump as president. Will his return to power turbocharge India-US relations, or will it worsen tensions lurking beneath the surface? Also, in the West is India's unresolved diplomatic standoff with Canada and its Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Will Canada's election slated for 2025 deliver a new government that will resolve tensions with India, or will tensions simply escalate? India's powerful northern neighbor, China, poses the biggest strategic challenge of all. The two countries have begun to unwind their 4-year standoff on India's northern border. But will this recovery last? Can India and China really bury the ghosts of the past? We decode these big developments in our year-ender report, and this is a special one from my colleague Shashank Mattu.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends on this.
There are a number of ways Donald Trump's return could actually be great news for India.
Like nobody's ever seen before.
Trump and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi share a strong personal rapport. And Trump has been clear about his respect for the Indian leader.
Modi, India.
Yeah.
He's a friend of mine. He's great. He's the nicest.
India.
You know, before him, they were replacing him every year. It was very unstable. He came along.
He's in a lot of
He's great. He's a friend of mine. But on the outside, he looks like he's your father. He's the nicest. Total killer.
Given how important personal relationships are for Trump, this could help push India-US relations forward. This could build on the solid work done during Trump's first term in office. During that term, India's defense imports from the US surged to $18 billion by 2019. Advanced weapons and technology transfers strengthened India's military. India was elevated to Tier 1 of the Strategic Trade Authorization List, which opened doors to high-end defense tech. Joint military exercises like Tiger Triumph deepened ties. The Trump administration backed India's stance against terrorism. The US supported Pakistan's grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force. Bilateral trade hit $142 billion by 2019.
Look, India, Prime Minister Modi has actually built rapport across multiple presidents. When he first came to DC, Obama was the president, then it was Trump, then it was Biden. So, for him, there's something natural in terms of how he forges those relationships. So that's helped hugely. And I think, the changes in India have helped as well. I know today a lot of countries are nervous about the US, okay? Let's be honest about it. We are not one of them.
In 2025, India will work with Trump to expand trade and business ties, develop key technologies and coordinate on China. And there is every chance that Trump's second term will turn out to be as good for India as the first. But there are also serious problems. Trump will have to deal with the fallout of the political upheaval in Bangladesh after the fall of Sheikh Hasina's government. India's relationship with the new interim government has been tense. And more than a few people in India believe that America undercut India's interest. Easing tensions and getting India and America back on the same page about their strategy in South Asia will be important in 2025. Trump's hardline stance on restricting skilled immigrants from coming into America could return in his second term. During his first term, Trump's policies, particularly on the H-1B visa, negatively impacted skilled Indians who wanted to live and work in America. There's also trade, which could turn out to be the biggest problem of all. Trump believes India is a major abuser of the international trade system and does not like high Indian tariffs on American goods. He has threatened retaliatory tariffs on India in the last few weeks.
We're going to be treating people very fairly, but the word reciprocal is important because if somebody charges us, India, we don't have to talk about own. If India charges us 100% and we charge them nothing for the same, they send in a bicycle and we send them a bicycle, they charge us 100 and 200. India charges a lot. Brazil charges a lot. If they want to charge us, that's fine, but we're going to charge them the same thing.
Moving on, there's the Canadian problem. India and Canada stand at crossroads. Their relationship wrecked by tensions over the Khalistan movement. But 2025 will see a general election that could replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau with a new government. Tensions flared in September 2023 when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused India's government of involvement in the death of pro-Khalistan figure Hardeep Singh Nijjar. India called the allegations absurd and politically motivated. In response, both nations expelled diplomats and India's relationship with Canada went into deep freeze. Things got even worse in October 2024 when Canada expelled 6 Indian diplomats, including High Commissioner Sanjay Verma. India responded with similar expulsions. Consular services have come to a halt, a proposed FTA has stalled and tensions are at an all-time high. But could 2025 deliver a change? Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is at the centre of India's spat with Canada. India's government has accused Trudeau of supporting extremist Khalistani groups to win support among Canada's Sikh diaspora. But his unpopular government could be on its way out. The country is set for a general election that Trudeau's Liberal Party is widely expected to lose. Senior ministers in Trudeau's government have resigned and his political allies have called on him to step down. With Trudeau on the way out in 2025, there could be an opportunity for India. His replacement is likely to be a conservative opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. A new government might take a softer approach towards India. Diplomatic engagement could resume. Ambassadors may return and consular services could normalize. India's biggest strategic challenge is its northern neighbor, China. For 4 years, India and China were locked in a tense border standoff. But now, a border deal has created an opportunity for both countries to reduce tensions. On October 21, 2024, a breakthrough was announced. India and China reached an agreement on patrolling arrangements along the disputed border. The BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia played a pivotal role. Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping held direct talks for the first time in years. But why did this happen now? Shifting global dynamics may be playing a role. India's growing ties with the United States and other allies could be a factor. China may see stabilizing relations with India as a counterbalance since America is playing pressure on Beijing. Although 2025 could see more progress towards normalization, there are still serious challenges. Core border issues remain unresolved. India insists on resolving these disputes before broader cooperation. China prefers engaging on broader issues first. But India-China competition isn't just about borders. Both countries are vying for influence across Asia, particularly in India's neighborhood. China's strategic ambitions clash with India's security concerns. Finding common ground remains an uphill battle. The question remains, are these steps the beginning of genuine progress, or just a temporary truce in a larger strategic rivalry? 2025 could be a decisive year for India-China relations.
We hope that the world in 2025 is filled with peace, hope and love, and the world leaders come together to restore the world in its rightful place. I, Geeta Mohan, along with my World Today team, wish you a very love-filled, hope-filled and peaceful New Year 2025. Goodbye and take care.